good time. Well, the difference between those two things is how you plan towards your retirement. Today, we are going to be having a chat with Captain Okai Akibe. Okay, he has served in the Army Intelligence Corps. He is the CEO and lead partner of Beacon Hill Consulting Services. He's also the CEO El Indigo Software Limited. He's a licensed maritime security consultant. He's a media consultant on national security issues, a researcher on emotional and social intelligence, and a researcher on metaverse technologies. He is grounded and he has paid his dues and done his homework. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thanks a lot for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So let's talk about retirement, right? Planning for it. Why is it important for us to start planning for retirement? I mean, whenever we hear planning for retirement, we feel like we're staring down a mountain of paperwork and trying to balance it. Where do we actually begin? That's my first question. Where do we begin?
Okay, that's a interesting question, especially from my experience in life so far. And the reason I say that is, I actually, in quotes, when you say the word retired, I actually retired at the age of 31, which by any standard is relatively young, and that was a big step for me because I'd put in roughly about 12 years in my military career, and I was actually eligible. I found out that I was actually eligible to qualify for a pension. And I started to think about it, and this is really tough because you're starting out, you have friends, you've developed a lifestyle, and then you want to take a deep dive into the deep. But I just thought that I had accumulated a lot of experience in the military, and I wanted to see how I could, kind of export that experience and that knowledge into the mainstream. So yeah, I think it's very strategic for people to think about retirement, but I think in discussing the term retirement, there's a more progressive way of looking at it, rather than looking at it like you're old and finished and you're just going to be home reading newspapers. It's kind of looking at how do you get more value for your skills and your experience. That's the way that I saw it at the time. And what that did for me was that, once I moved out of military service, I had to reinvent myself. So I spent a lot of time in school, working and schooling, so delving into new areas, then taking the time to kind of start a business.
Very interesting. Now, you mentioned pension, and I know that the word pension is thrown about left, right, and center, especially in the news in Nigeria when we hear that pensioners are being owed their pensions. But when it comes down to it, you ask an average person on the street what a pension is. The intricacies of what it is, we just might not know. So how about you break down for us what a pension really is and how it's calculated and stuff like that?
Okay. Yeah, so a pension is kind of like payment for services rendered for the rest of your lifetime, even though it varies from organization to organization. Now, some organizations in the corporate sector, like in the oil and gas sector and some other sectors like that, they don't actually work with pensions. What they work with are payoffs, because the whole concept of pension sometimes can be very confusing, especially in the corporate sector, because you are going to be paying off someone for life. So, the thing about life expectancy is that especially in more developed economies, you'd find that life expectancy across places like Western Europe will be in the early 80s, so 85, 90. So you imagine that somebody is retiring at 65, which would be roughly around the age that people would retire at the full length of their career. So you're looking at paying somebody for another 30 years, possibly, depending on, their health status. So it differs for different organizations. For the government, yes, that's the kind of system that they use. Now it's on a kind of on a pro rata basis that the pension is worked out. So I didn't get to the end of my career. So I have my mates, people I trained in the Nigerian Defense Academy with. Most of them are still in the service. They're coming towards the full length of their careers. So it's kind of on a pro rata basis. So there's a minimum threshold. So it's like you have to attain a certain number of years, maybe 15 years, maybe 20 years before you qualify at all. And then from that point, it's worked out with the full length of your career. So you'd find that in some systems, like in the military system, if you get to the full length of your career and a certain rank, then you start to earn this almost more or less the same salary that you were taking before you left. And I think it's really interesting that you decided to discuss this, because it's very strategic, and you raised a very important issue about the issue of pension being a bit controversial sometimes. You hear about people not being paid their pensions. I have a couple of people that, left their careers and their pension plans were thwarted. And the pension plans have changed over time, because far back, you didn't have to pay anything. Now, you kind of contribute towards the pension. We also have to think about other things like investments, kind of as you go along, and so those kind of add up to your whole kind of pension plan.
Oh, okay. Now that's pretty interesting. You mentioned your entire journey and how you retired before the end of your career. Did you have a vision board for your retirement? And how did that help you successfully retire?
Well, I wouldn't say I had a vision board in the sense that it was clearly worked out. But the fact is that when I actually got admission into the Defense Academy, I had told myself that I would get to a certain point and then I would move on, because I didn't see myself wanting to endure to the full length of the career. I still had a lot of interests that I wanted to pursue on the outside, and I realized that serving in the military would constrain me for a while, and then once I came out of it, it was going to take me a bit of time to be able to reinvest myself into the mainstream. So I didn't have a very clear path, but when I was getting towards that threshold that I'd made for myself, I started to think, this is another fantastic question that you're asking, because if you have early plans, that helps you, especially in the area of developing your expertise. There might be certain new areas that you need to develop expertise. Like coming out of the military intelligence, I definitely had certain skills, but then some of those skills, applying them into the mainstream, sometimes will not work immediately. And like when I came out, you didn't really have the kind of security situation that you have now. Now, people coming out of the military now, a whole lot of them are easily absorbed back into the system, because you have companies, individuals that are looking for people with those kind of skills. So I had to go deeper, researching into certain other areas, which has kind of formed the basis for the first company that I created, and also the second company that we just started up 2 years ago.
Very interesting. Now, most people retire at the end of their career, as opposed to you who, retired in the middle of it. Now, and sometimes, I don't want to say most of the time, but it's more common to find people who have retired at the end of their career end up frustrated. There's this loneliness and frustration at the end of it. What role does staying healthy play in being fulfilled after retirement? And from when do you start to build towards that?
Yeah, that's another very interesting question. Well, like for me, being in the military meant that, we had to keep fit most of the time, because every year you have medical exams to ensure that you're fit. But apart from that, I had my own sporting activities. I used to play a lot of tennis, like almost every day. Even now, I'm the kind of individual that I kind of engage in what not sports like contact sports or competitive sports like I used to because of time and space, but I still work out a lot, and that's really very important because at the end of the day, I see health and well-being kind of affecting your ability to be able to be situationally aware of what is trending in your environment. Where is the economy going? Because we live in a world that is consistently changing. That's the only thing that is constant, change. And you have to always find how you can situate yourself in that world as it's moving along. So health and well-being does help, as far as I'm concerned, to keep you sharp, to inspire you, and then it also kind of determines the amount of endurance that you have. Like, I kind of pride myself in the sense that if I'm on a team, I'm working with the team, it's very unlikely that any member of my team will outwork me because I have a strong work ethic, and I try as much as possible to stay in shape and to keep my mind active. I always have at least one book that I'm reading that is leading me into a new field where I can develop new ideas. Now, you talked a little bit about my bio, and you'd find that I'm a bit multidisciplinary. And one of the things that I think that we should all embrace is the fact that we know more than we think we do. Sometimes people limit themselves. They say, "Oh, I'm an engineer and I'm not this," but we find that we actually have so many people buried inside of us, and those people can come out, and you can see sheer genius if you invest yourself in a completely different aspect. And that's why you see now that we've gone into tech and we've been developing what we call African technologies, and we're at that point that we want to be able to test the market. But I'm coming from a very different place.
All right, now, would you encourage you mentioned how, the world is constantly changing, and most of the time when people, retire, they have to find a way to incorporate themselves in society again and still feel useful, because, I'm of the opinion that the human beings are not created to be redundant. We're created to always do something. So when you're redundant, there's a feeling of frustration that it leaves you with. Now, would you encourage people to, while they're still in service, whatever discipline it is that they're involved in, to start looking for other things that they could start developing themselves in while as they prepare for retirement? Is it something you would encourage, or should they wait until they've finished, until they've retired?
No, completely. Even though they do need to have, I would say that they would need to have a balance, because sometimes you find that some people are engaged in a certain job or profession at a point in time, and they're not well invested in it. And what I mean is, they're not trying to get to the top of their game there, and your work ethic is always going to determine who you are in any other endeavor. That's what I think. So it's important to first of all ensure that wherever it is that an individual is working or deployed, because that's kind of what employment really is, you're able to discover yourself, in the jobs that you do, because you find that sometimes some people think some jobs are too menial. But I actually think that every job tests you. It tests your creativity. It tests your resilience. So that's aspect of it. And I think the concept or the perception of what retirement is should change. It shouldn't be, something that we're scared of, we're not looking forward to, because it's actually exporting experience for me from one aspect of life to another. And that's why you'd find that you have people like Warren Buffett at the age of 93, still very active. So I think it's a mental disposition in the way we see ourselves, and just going back to that point that you mentioned about health, I think that is so important. And health is not just about just doing the medical checks alone and doing the exercising alone, but actually showing keen interest in well-being, reading up material, finding out what the new science is, because science is always finding out different things. They'll say, oh, okay, too much salt is not good for you today. Because I remember once I went for a medical checkup and the doctor said, oh, okay, you know what? You need to eat a bit more red meat. And I'm like, for real? But I thought we were supposed to stop red meat. And then the doctor says, no, but red meat is a great source of iron. You know, so we have to invest ourselves in trying to be more proactive, so you can have a conversation with even a medical practitioner about your own health and not just sit there like dumb, absorbing everything without even being able to contribute. Because the time and the age that we live in gives us the opportunity to be able to explore the information for ourselves. There's a lot of interesting science that is around now regarding health and well-being, longevity, and all of that we need to continue to explore.
Very interesting. Now let's talk about the emotional aspect of retirement. You're retired yourself. What was there any? Did you have an emotional shift? Was there an emotional effect to your leaving the service?
Oh yeah, definitely. There would be definitely. Now, for anybody that served in the military is a very different place of assignment, in the sense that, you know, I spent 5 years training in the Nigerian Defense Academy alongside with a whole lot of other people. And even when you're in service proper, the military, it has its own regimentation, its own drills. So it's a place that it impacts on you. So funny enough, for years after leaving the service, I kept dreaming I was back there. And that still happens to me occasionally, you know. So there will be some kind of emotional attachment to a place that you've invested yourself for years. In my case, I feel very good. I feel very honored to have had the opportunity to serve alongside a whole lot of people that are now responsible for protecting our nation. I feel very tested in the sense that I didn't realize that I could go through all of the physical challenges that we went through in training. So I've come away with that great emotional feeling, and this is very important because I've met a lot of people from different sectors that are just filled with regrets, you know. And a lot of them are not able to move on. Some of them have been able to kind of partially cope, but then they're not able to go on to do great things. Because I think that anyone that's retiring at full age, and let's say full age is 65, I think, maybe in some cases, I think they're stretching it to 70, that should actually be a launching point for another life. But it has to be planned. It has to be planned in detail. You have to prepare for that. Because I actually feel so inspired every day when I wake up, because I just realized that, you know, I've lived one life in the military, that I have a whole set of people that don't even know I was in the military, because I'm discussing different things. And when they hear that I was in the military, they get surprised because I'm running a completely new life. And I can probably do that for another 20 years and maybe start something else, redefine myself again.
Where did you find the will? And I'm asking this so when you're answering it, like, have at the back of your mind, it's for the person that is thinking, I don't know where to find the will to do something else. Trying new things can be very scary in the real sense of it. Where did you find the willpower to reinvent yourself? Where did you get that push? And where would you advise people to search for it from?
Well, I would say, first of all, to look inside, you know, and look backwards is what I say. Look backwards as far back as you can, because sometimes our best pictures of ourselves and who we possibly are is those pictures of us as kids when we were innocent, you know, and when we did things without fear, you know. Most kids just say, listen, I want to be this, I want to be a doctor. They don't think I have to take JAMB and I have to get this cutoff mark. They just want to be that. So I tend to go back in time, and I usually advise people to do that. Go back in time and explore yourself. Now, growing up as a kid, I was always interested in writing, and I was always writing stuff. Always writing fictional stuff, and that always intrigued me. I was always trying to create a small team to do something. So I think the starting point is to start with self. Because there is never going to be a better motivator than self. I mean, it's great to listen to people. There are great motivational speakers out there that can inspire you, but the best motivator for me is self. I learned that many years ago, and that's kind of what I do. Early mornings, I'm going out running or walking, I'm talking to myself. I'm motivating myself. I'm talking about what I expect to see, what I think the future is, and how we're gonna get there. So I actually even think that doing some of these things audibly reinforces it to self. Because and I've seen this happen, many times in my own life, and I still do that, because we still have projects, and some of these projects are ambitious projects that we have in front of us. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, wow, this is really, something big. Haven't I taken on too much? But then I talk to myself and I say, but what if we can do it? And what's really stopping us from doing it? So I think it's self. Self has to be the motivator. And then wherever you can get, support, friends, family, from faith, then we reach out to that as well.
Yeah, and now that you've mentioned friends, family, social support, let's talk about the loneliness that comes with retirement. Some people go as far as having children that they call retirement babies, so that when all of their kids, have left the house, they have someone to... How do you plan for the loneliness that comes with retirement? Actually, is there a loneliness that comes with retirement? And then how do you plan towards, dealing with it?
Well, okay. So, I haven't experienced that, because, like I said, I retired, in quotes, retired very young. I was 31, like I said, when I retired. I haven't even, started out. I still have a long way to go. But I have started to anticipate that, even though, like I said, for me, I don't really consider retirement in the traditional way that people look at retirement, because I've already done that. I'm not looking ahead and saying, oh, when I retired a while back, and I was very young when I did that. But I think that lifestyle is very important, in working out a system that you have that kind of support, because loneliness is a real problem sometimes. But then loneliness is also a place where you can find self, where you can think, where you can plan, because sometimes when there's too much noise, or you're caught up in the rat race, and I sometimes see people caught up in the rat race too much that they can't discover self, and sometimes I see and talk to people, because I do mentor some people, and the complaint is lack of resources, and I understand that, but there's one resource that's... Can you imagine? If you can, then your imagination can drive you into receiving resources or accessing resources.
Got that. Now, the final talking point I do have before we wrap up, because time is starting to close in on us. Let's discuss the challenges that most retirees are facing now as regards to government policies and programs. We have a number of government policies and programs, right, that are are related to retirement. We have the Pension Reform Act, we have the Contributory Pension Scheme, and whatnot. But despite the existence of all of these pension policies and the programs, we still have challenges in implementation. When we're talking about inadequate coverage, delays in pension payment, I think that's the most talked about point. Mismanagement of pension funds and pension fraud. How do you think these can be addressed so that pensioners are treated with more respect from the government that they serve? Now I'm talking about people that served under the government or in the government.
Yeah, that's always going to be a very tough question to answer. For me, I'll just go completely to the other side and say, for anyone that is still has time to think, to plan, to work, I would say, we live in an age and a time where there's a lot of opportunity out there, people are trading, people are selling stuff, people are vlogging. Find your niche and create your own treasure, because there's always going to be a risk that pension funds will broke. There's always going to be a risk that pensions will be delayed. So you don't want to be that guy that's waiting for the pension. And sometimes in our system, this is one of the things, in my opinion, that drives corruption. Because some people, a whole lot of people that are in the public sector are in a dread of retirement. So the thinking is, hey, I have to amass as much as I can so that when I retire, I don't ever have any needs whatsoever. But a lot of them have found out that that is not the case, because the inflation sets in and the value of your capital starts to shrink. So I would always feel that, especially in this dispensation, the way forward is to make yourself as valuable as possible, and in the moment, instead of being a dinosaur all the time, try and stay in the moment. Because sometimes you have somebody that's 30, you're talking to them and they're talking like they're already retired. It's like they're lost, and I understand that, and that's why some of the things that I do and programs I try to work with people on is all about trying to create more of an awareness of the time that we live in and the opportunities.
All right.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, yes, it does. Yes.
because I didn't want to dive into the problems with some of the pension reform, some of these pension programs, and that's why I started off by saying, the whole concept of pensions, right, it's a very confusing, in a way controversial system. Maybe not now, but as time continues to go by. And I'll give you an example. In Japan, longevity, which should be, is now becoming a problem, because you're finding that in Japan, people are living so much longer, 95, 100, and they're being paid pensions. So who carries the burden for paying the pensions? It's the younger generations. And that's why you find that there's this huge problem now in Japan that they're trying to solve. So at some point in life, the whole concept of pensions is going to have to change a bit. And it is changing. It is changing.
All right, then. In 2 minutes, what is your word to people that are already retired, and that individual that's thinking about is like, okay, it's going to come inadvertently. How do I prepare for it?
Spend time on your own. Spend time to think. Look back. Try to think about where you're gifted. Look for some niche areas, because we have a great opportunity with the internet. The internet is growing. I was just looking at figures today. The amount of transactions that Nigeria had online last year, it's mind blowing. It just means that in terms of the way our economy is growing, there's so much more opportunity in it. And we actually even want to invest in people that are retiring, because they have a lot of value that they're bringing. But the problem is, most of the time, they don't know where to apply the value. And that's the thing.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Retirement is all about living it up and making every day count. Spend time by yourself, reinvent yourself, and get ready for it, because it's coming for you. Huge thanks to you, Captain Okai Akibe, for joining us on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. And don't forget to stay tuned. VOP 96.1 FM by 6 p.m. We're going to be bringing you the world news at 6. It's very important to keep yourself updated with the things happening, right? Stay retirement ready. Until next time, my name is Chiwe Blessing, and I'm just going to leave you with advice from Adekule Gold and Farah Williams. They say, fall up be falling up. Don't be falling down, because that's the best way to go.
Grand opening of the Garage Abuja. From the 9th to the 11th of February, step into elegance at number 11, Boncan Crescent, 3rd Avenue, Guarimpa. For inquiries and reservations with special performances by Dan Deasy and Hot Kid, Hype Man Nelson. Music policy is by DJ Hipson. Show starts at 10 p.m.
You will they make money and you know they show your